On May 14, 2026, about an hour before I would normally close the shop, a 2018 RAV4 pulled into my bay with a woman behind the wheel who looked more tired than upset. She said she had done the math 3 times because she did not believe it the first 2. When she bought the truck 4 years earlier, she was averaging almost 30 miles per gallon on her commute. Lately, she was lucky to see 21. No check engine light, no rough idle, no noise. The engine ran exactly the way it always had. She had already spent $140 on a tune-up at a quick lube place, new spark plugs included, and her mileage did not move a single digit. Today, I am revealing the hidden sensor that is quietly destroying gas mileage on Toyota after Toyota, why it almost never triggers a warning light until the damage has been happening for months, and the 15-minute fix that can bring your fuel economy back without replacing a single expensive part. I have seen this exact story more times than I can count, and it always starts the same way. A driver swears nothing has changed. Same commute, same driving habits, same gas station. And yet the numbers on the dash keep getting worse. That is the tell, because this failure does not come from bad driving or bad luck. It comes from a sensor most Toyota owners have never heard of, sitting in a place they will never think to look, quietly lying to the engine about the one thing the engine needs to know before it can do anything else: how much air is actually coming in. I popped the hood on that RAV4 and did not even reach for a wrench. I pulled out my scanner, plugged into the port under the dash, and went straight to live data. I was not looking for codes. There were none. I was looking for a number most technicians barely glance at: fuel trim. And there it was, climbing steadily into double digits, positive and rising, the engine control unit quietly begging for more fuel than it should have needed. I looked at the intake tube. Right where it meets the air filter box sat a small black sensor about the size of a lighter, 4 wires running into it, doing a job most owners could not even name. That little sensor is called the mass airflow sensor, and on that RAV4, it was the reason a healthy, well-maintained engine was burning nearly a third more fuel than it should have been. Here is the part that should bother you. Unlike a misfire or a bad transmission, this problem does not announce itself. Your engine will not stumble. It will not hesitate. It will not throw a check engine light until things get dramatically worse, and by then you have already paid for it dozens of times over at the pump. I have been working on Toyotas for over 2 decades, and I can tell you the mass airflow sensor is one of the most quietly destructive parts in the entire engine bay, precisely because it fails in slow motion. It does not brake, it drifts, and your engine trusts it completely the entire way down. Most drivers assume fuel economy just fades with age, like tires wearing thin. So when miles per gallon slowly drops, they shrug it off. They blame the weather, the traffic, the price of gas going up. Almost nobody blames a 4-wire sensor buried in the intake tube that costs less than a tank of gas to replace. But that sensor is doing something absolutely critical every second your engine runs. And when it starts lying, your Toyota has no way of knowing the truth. Every modern Toyota engine, whether it is a Corolla, a Camry, a RAV4, a Highlander, or a Tacoma, decides how much fuel to inject based on one core piece of information: how much air is entering the engine right now. The mass airflow sensor sits directly in the intake path, usually right behind the air filter, and it uses a tiny heated wire or heated film to measure exactly how much air is passing over it. As air flows past that element, it cools it down. The sensor measures how much electrical current is needed to keep that element at a constant temperature, and from that single measurement, the engine control unit calculates precisely how much fuel to inject to keep the air-fuel ratio correct. Too much fuel for the air coming in, and you run rich, wasting gas and fouling components. Too little fuel and you run lean, risking engine damage. Get it right, and the engine breathes exactly the way Toyota engineered it to breathe. That measurement happens dozens of times per second, and your engine has no way to verify it independently. It trusts the mass airflow sensor completely, the same way you would trust a fuel gauge without ever checking the tank yourself. If the sensor reports correct airflow, everything downstream works beautifully. Timing lines up, fuel delivery is precise, combustion is clean. But if that heated wire gets coated with even a thin film of contamination, the engine starts making decisions based on a number that is simply wrong. This is where things get interesting because the sensor rarely fails all at once. It degrades gradually, and the most common cause is not old age. It is contamination. Every time air flows into your engine, it carries a small amount of everything floating around it. Road dust, pollen, moisture, and if your air filter is not sealing properly or is the wrong type, oil vapor as well. Over months and years, a microscopic film builds up on that heated element. It does not need to be thick. It only needs to be present because that film acts like a tiny blanket, insulating the sensing wire from the airflow around it. The sensor needs more current to maintain its temperature, and it reports that as a lower airflow reading than what is actually happening. Your engine believes less air is coming in than really is, so it pulls fuel delivery down to compensate, and now you are running lean. On the RAV4 in my bay, the previous owner had installed an aftermarket cotton air filter, the reusable kind that gets treated with a light oil to help it trap dust. Those filters work fine when maintained properly, but if they are over-oiled, even slightly, that oil can wick past the filter media and coat the mass airflow sensor sitting just downstream. I have pulled dozens of these sensors out of Toyotas and found a fine, almost invisible haze across the sensing element, something you would never notice without cleaning it and comparing the difference. That haze was enough to throw off the reading by a meaningful percentage, and the engine had been quietly adjusting for it for who knows how long. Now here is where most people expect a lean condition to mean better fuel economy, because less fuel sounds like it should mean more miles per gallon. That logic feels right, but it is backwards, and this is the detail almost nobody explains correctly. Modern engine control units are built to protect against lean conditions aggressively because a lean mixture burns hotter and can damage pistons, valves, and catalytic converters. So when the oxygen sensor reading suggests the mixture is leaner than it should be, the system compensates by adding fuel back in through long-term fuel trim, correcting for what it believes is a mechanical shortfall in the intake. The engine ends up injecting more fuel than the actual air entering the cylinders calls for, all because the very first measurement in the chain was wrong to begin with. You end up with an engine that runs rich in response to a sensor that reported lean, wasting fuel, while every other system tries to correct a mistake that started at the intake. That RAV4's fuel trim numbers told the whole story before I ever touched the sensor. Long-term fuel trim sitting in the low teens, positive and steady, meant the computer had been adding somewhere between 10 and 15% more fuel than baseline for a very long time. That is not a rounding error. That is real money leaving her tank every single time she started the engine, and it had been happening for months without a single warning light because fuel trim has to drift much further than that before it crosses the threshold that triggers a code. This is the part that genuinely surprises people. A 10 to 15% fuel trim correction does not sound dramatic on a screen, but multiply that across every mile she drove for half a year, and you are talking about paying for an extra tank of gas roughly every 10 fill-ups for nothing. No performance benefit, no smoother idle, just quietly burning money, because one small sensor could no longer tell the truth about the air moving past it. And because the engine compensates so effectively, the car still starts, idles, and accelerates fine. That is exactly why almost nobody catches this early. Everything feels normal right up until the fuel bill forces the question, I want to be clear about something because this is where drivers panic unnecessarily. A dirty or drifting mass airflow sensor is almost never an emergency. Your engine is not about to fail, and you are not getting stranded on the side of the road. What you are doing is slowly overpaying for gasoline while a 4-wire sensor reports numbers that no longer match reality, and the engine dutifully compensates without ever telling you it is struggling. That is the trap. The car protects itself so well that the financial damage becomes the only symptom you will ever see. So once you understand that this sensor is lying, and once you understand why the engine responds by burning extra fuel instead of saving it, the next question is obvious. How do you check it? How do you fix it? And how do you make sure it does not happen again? That is exactly what I walked that RAV4 through, and it is exactly what I am going to walk you through now. Checking a mass airflow sensor does not require a shop full of equipment. You need a scan tool that reads live data, and a basic $15 or $20 Bluetooth code reader paired with a free phone app will show you what you need. Start the engine, let it idle, and pull up long-term and short-term fuel trim on both banks if your engine has two. On a healthy Toyota, those numbers should sit close to 0. If you see long-term trim sitting persistently above 10% positive, especially at idle and light cruise, that is a strong signal the engine is compensating for air it believes is missing, and a mass airflow sensor reporting low is one of the most common reasons behind exactly that pattern. The next step is a visual inspection, something almost any owner can do in their driveway. Locate the air filter box near the front of the engine bay and trace the intake tube running from it toward the throttle body. The mass airflow sensor is typically mounted right where that tube leaves the filter box, held in with 2 or 4 small screws, with a connector plugged into the top. Unplug the connector, remove the screws, and slide the sensor out. Do not touch the sensing element itself, the small wire or film bridge visible through the housing, since even skin oils can affect its accuracy. Instead, use a dedicated mass airflow sensor cleaner sold at almost any auto parts store for around $8 to $12. Spray it directly onto the element, let it air dry completely for at least 10 minutes, and reinstall. Do not use brake cleaner or carburetor cleaner, since those can leave residue or damage the delicate wire. On that RAV4, I pulled the sensor, and even before cleaning, I could see a faint discoloration across the element under a flashlight, subtle but real. I cleaned it, let it dry, reinstalled it, and cleared the adaptive fuel trims through the scan tool so the engine would relearn from a clean baseline instead of trying to blend old bad data with new good data. I told her to drive normally for the next 15 to 20 minutes, nothing aggressive, mixing idle time with steady cruising, so the engine control unit could rebuild its fuel trim values around accurate airflow information. Cleaning solves the problem in a genuinely large percentage of cases, especially when contamination from an oiled filter or general road grime is the cause. But if a sensor has been contaminated for years, or the vehicle has crossed somewhere around 100,000 to 150,000 miles without ever being cleaned, the sensing element can degrade to the point where cleaning improves the reading but does not fully restore it. In those cases, replacement is the right call, and this is one of the more affordable sensors on the car. A quality replacement, ideally an OEM Denso unit, since Denso manufactures the factory sensor for most Toyota engines, typically runs $150 to $250 for the part on most Camry, Corolla, and RAV4 applications, with installation taking well under an hour. Compare that to quietly overpaying for gasoline every week for a year, and the math is not close. Prevention matters just as much as the fix itself. If you run an aftermarket reusable air filter, follow the oiling instructions exactly and never over-oil it, since excess oil is the single most common cause of premature mass airflow contamination I see in my shop. If you stick with a factory paper filter, replace it on Toyota's recommended interval, generally every 30,000 miles, sooner if you drive on dusty or gravel roads often. A clean, properly sealed air filter is the best insurance policy this sensor will ever have. I want to leave you with the same message I gave that RAV4 owner as she pulled out of my lot. Your fuel economy does not usually drop because your engine is aging, or because gas prices are eating into your budget more than they used to. More often, it drops because one small, inexpensive, completely overlooked sensor started telling your engine a story that was not true anymore, and your engine, doing exactly what it was designed to do, believed every word of it. 15 minutes and a can of sensor cleaner brought her fuel economy back within a few miles per gallon of where it started, and she did not spend $1 on parts. Before you accept declining gas mileage as just something your Toyota does as it gets older, check the one sensor almost nobody thinks to check first. If this saved you from wondering why your fuel economy keeps dropping for no reason, hit like so more Toyota owners see it before they waste another tank of gas. Subscribe. If you want more of these hidden fixes, explain the way a mechanic would explain them to a friend, not the way a dealership explains them to a customer. And if your mileage has ever mysteriously bounced back after a simple fix like this one, tell me about it in the comments, because stories like that are exactly why I keep making these videos.